and this is my manuscript. That's Trouble Triangle, and this is my editor's notes. Bitch. So anyway, I've done the book. This is the first one of Tyler's Trouble Trilogy, and I'm going to read Chapter 1 from the first book called Trouble Triangle. So I hope to have this out in early December, so you can put it on your Christmas list. And I hope you enjoy the story. Okay? Chapter 1, Trouble Triangle, January 2nd, 1982. A short, red-headed cop opened a steel door and nudged me in with his nightstick. Shivers ran through my body as the door slammed and he turned the key. Metal grinding against metal, engaging the locks. The jail cell held the same smell of stale piss as it did the last time I failed to outrun the sheriff. A Kilroy was here logo had been scrawled onto the brown cell wall, and a single light bulb housed in a flimsy metal shroud flickered the lone source of illumination. A wooden slatted bench ran the length of the wall, with the view into the corridor being a concrete wall on the other side of the 10-foot span of gray iron bars. One inmate stretched out on the bench in the middle of the cell opposite the bars. He laid in the corpse position with love, hate tattooed on the knuckles of each hand. Another detainee sat in the corner, dribbling and chanting like a drunk monk. My stomach nodded, and I moved to the other side where the air seemed less polluted with funk. An hour must have passed before I saw any other life besides my new roommates. "Chambers!" the policeman barked as he unlocked the cell door. He let me out and escorted me down a bland hallway, which felt like an enclosed tunnel to a large room at the end of the hall. He pushed me inside toward a table with 4 chairs that sat in the middle of a sparse room. A clock hung on the beige wall and loudly ticked every passing second. The odor of day-old coffee lingered in the air. I sat at the table trying to look unflustered, but nausea gurgled inside me. Dad had spent some time in the pokey and gave me some tips about how best to handle situations like this. I sat waiting for 15 minutes before the incredible Hulk in uniform came in. He wasn't particularly tall, but his chest was enormous. I could see Hulk's pecs flex under his badge and the name tag that read Jones. His brown hair was cut short and his jaw jutted out. He offered a lame smile. Another cop stood at the door. Hulk pulled out the chair and sat opposite me. He brushed some donut crumbs off the table and clasped his hands in front of him, resting his forearms on the plastic veneer tabletop. "Mr. Chambers," Hulk said, "looks like you've been having a little fun." He feigned a sarcastic chuckle. "Well, you might call it fun, but we call it breaking the law. Now, why don't you tell me where you've been tonight and what you've been doing?" I crossed my arms. "I want a lawyer. Dad always told me never tell the cops anything. It's their job to figure it out. If they can't, you're off the hook." Hulk leaned back, locking his hands behind his head. Perspiration marks stained his shirt under his arms. "You don't need a lawyer, son. We're just having a little informal chat. Now, you want to tell me where you've been tonight?" "Not really." Hulk stood up. His weak smile turned into a vicious snarl. He circled the table in slow, deliberate steps. He stopped in front of me with his squinty eyes focused on my face. He looked down at me for just under an eternity. In one swift movement, his fist came crashing down on the table with an almighty thud. I jumped as much as the table did, and had that split second of butt clenching to stop any sudden bowel movements. "God damn it, punk! We know you and your buddy skipped out on the bills at Pete's Palace. Then you resisted arrest, nearly ran a police vehicle, causing damage to said police vehicle, reckless driving." He threw his arms in the air. "Should I go on?" He stared at me with his upper lip quivering with rage like a snarling Doberman pinscher, and he shoved his finger in my face. "You're in a whole heap of shit, buddy boy. It would behoove you to cooperate." I shifted in my seat. "So, if I tell you everything I know, you'll let me go?" Hulk laughed. "Your little accomplice Bobby isn't a hard ass like you. He spilled his guts, so we have a confession, not to mention witnesses. Bobby's just a kid. ratted you out and were letting him go. Not much of a Bonnie to your Clyde, was he? Hope motioned to the cop standing by the door to come over. And this ain't your first bust either, is it, punk? My heart sank as beads of sweat tickled my brow. The pizza palette of spicy sausage worked its way up from my stomach to the back of my throat. I had to fight not to unleash the contents of my stomach onto Hulk's patent leather shoes. Hulk leaned down. Let's see how your little candy ass likes it in jail. You know what they do with blue-eyed boys on the inside? He pressed his knuckles on the table and leaned in closer, his breath saturated by mint. Well, they won't be looking into your eyes, and you won't be seeing theirs either, if you know what I mean. He gave me a wink and a sly grin. The smile disappeared and he punched the table. You going down, punk. He stood up straight. Get him out of my face, he said to the other cop. The realization of doing time began to sink in. I had an aching feeling in the pit of my stomach, and it wasn't from the pepperoni. You got one phone call. You want to make it now? The cop asked. I looked at the clock. Near enough 1 in the morning. Nah, I'll leave it. The cop grabbed my arm and firmly escorted me into the holding cell. The door slammed again, and the light continued to flicker as the guard left. I found space on the bench to lie down on the other side away from Crazy Man. After laying on the wooden slats for 7 hours, I called my mom at 8 o'clock in the morning. She came down for the preliminary hearing and listened to the judge set my trial for 4 weeks away. She posted bail, and we walked through the freshly fallen snow to the parking lot. 1981 sucked bad. 1982 was sucking worse. We climbed into her Buick Skylark. The pine tree air freshener had lost its scent, yet still dangled from the rearview mirror. She pulled her visor down, checked her makeup in the mirror, and tucked some of her loose auburn hair behind her ear before we headed off. She still had her Miss Indiana pageant good looks, but she had become quite bitter since Dad left her last year. You just can't help yourself, can you? She started. How many times is this, Tyler? 3, 4, 5? I've lost count. Good thing you didn't try to call me at 2 in the morning like you did last time. I would have let your ass sit there. This is the last time, Tyler, so help me God. I stared out the window, not saying anything. We drove home in silence. Once inside, she gestured for me to sit at the kitchen table. I avoided making eye contact with her by looking at her collection of Norman Rockwell painted plates hanging on the walls around the ceiling. She sat opposite me and stared at me, drumming her fingers on the table. Tyler, what am I going to do with you? Ever since your father left, you've just gone off the rails. Drinking, smoking, doing drugs, in and out of jail, and you're barely 19. I don't know what to do with you anymore. I leaned back and crossed my arms. Why don't you just kick me out then, like you did Dad? I looked at Whistler's mother on the ceramic plate hanging on the wall. Mom knew how to throw daggers from her eyes, and I wanted to avoid that. Feeling them was enough. John Tyler Chambers, your father bedded some whore in our bed. I've put up with this shit for years. She stood up, pushing the chair away with the back of her legs. You want to know why? I figured the pause was for effect and the question rhetorical. For you, hoping you could grow up in what you thought was a stable environment. Just because your dad isn't here to give you a clip around the ears, you think you can run riot without consequences. She walked over to the sink and got a glass of water. She sat back down. What's wrong with you? When you graduated, I told you to go out and get a job. You come back with some pissant job making minimum wage. She placed her hands on the side of her head. You know how embarrassing it is to go to church and have the pastor ask me, Hi, Tyler. Hi, Mrs. Chambers. How's Tyler? And I have to say, well, Reverend, when he's not drunk or in jail, he's out frying fucking chicken. She slammed her hand on the table. I stared at the top of the table. Looked like your useless speech was coming my way again. It's like you have something to prove, like what a tough guy you are, and you don't need anyone. You're just like that useless father of yours. I brought my head up to match her glare. It always upset me when she spoke badly about Dad. She was probably right, but he had always been cool to me. He still called me once a week, usually just to tell me about his latest conquest. But at least he didn't keep telling me I was useless. I miss him, I said. So what? Get over it. She flicked her hand in the air. He's gone and I see you going down the same loser road as him. How come you never bring the same girl home twice? It's always someone different. I don't know. We'll get tired of them, I guess. That's exactly what I mean. The way your father runs around with women is no way to behave. And I see you acting just like him. You constantly talk back to me. You go out smoking dope, come home drunk at all hours. I can't deal with it anymore. You're never going to amount to anything. Why don't you take a volume like you usually do? You little shit. Her eyes narrowed and her lips pressed tightly together. I want you out of my house. Oh, I get it. Like father, like son. I gave her my defiant look. Just take turns kicking us out. Why doesn't that surprise me? Her face contorted with anger. She lurched across the table with lightning speed. She whacked me so hard beside the face I thought she broke a molar. I can't take this shit anymore. Her eyes burrowed through my head. Just get out. I rubbed the side of my face. Cool. I'm not a kid anymore, you know. I can take care of myself. She smirked. Good. Because that's exactly what you're going to have to start doing. I hope the judge locks you up. That teacher, dumbass. She left the table and went to her bedroom door. Back up. She left the table, went to her bedroom, and slammed the door. And that is chapter 1.